You're not gonna face the camera, baby? You're not gonna show the world how pretty you are? Okay, fine. While the early work of an artist can be maligned, I actually tend to really enjoy it. You can see an artist developing their voice through experimentation, chasing styles, and really working themselves out in a way that I find really interesting. And David Bowie is no exception in that regard. So first off, the compilation early on. This is his period of trying to be a rock star, and he ends up sounding like every other 60s British rocker. Working class white kids trying to emulate the sounds of American black artists. But if you like the early work of the Beatles, The Who, or the Kinks, you'll probably find something to enjoy in this album. In fact, one of the producers for the Kinks actually finished working with them before working with David Bowie on some of these demos. The album doesn't really stand out that much, not only from David Bowie's discography, but from the genre of 60s British rock. There are a few good covers here, and some notable artists that Bowie worked with, like Jimmy Page, being on the song I Pity the Fool. Bowie shows a decent grip of songwriting on some of his original songs, while others are just not very good. The first song written by Bowie to be recorded was called Take My Tip. If I had to describe the song, it's about a woman that's hard to impress, which isn't really up to par with what you expect from Bowie's lyrics, but with this being the first one, I'll let that pass. He had to start somewhere. The first song he recorded as a solo artist was called Can't Help Thinking About Me. It's one of the better tracks on this album, it stands out a little bit more from the rest, although David Bowie did say that it had some of his worst lyrics with the lines, "My girl calls my name, hi Dave, drop in, see you around, come back if you're this way again." I don't find them to be that bad, but it's what he says in VH1 Storytellers, which we'll eventually get to. One of my favorite songs from this collection is called I Dig Everything. It's a very hippie-ish song. It's got a nice little organ sound to it. Now, from this point, David Bowie took a huge turn when he got signed to Deram. He is a folk rock artist. This was not a great career move, and I'm not just saying that as my own opinion. Most David Bowie fans skip this album when talking about his chronology. It also doesn't help that he kind of ignored it for a while, and it's understandable why. It was a complete commercial and critical failure. His first studio album, self-titled David Bowie. Now, his voice is odd. That's one of the things people like about it, is it's so distinct. That squeaky baritone is something that he would utilize to great success. Just not here. It's actually pushed a bit too far in some places, and it just becomes irritating. The first song on the album is called Uncle Arthur. It's a song about an immature man, and it's terrible. The next song fares a bit better with Sell Me a Coat. It uses winter as a backdrop for a breakup. It's a nice little moody song. Love You Till Tuesday is more of a tongue-in-cheek romance song about someone who's very loose with their lovin'. It is a bit too cheery though, and it goes on longer than it needs to. Then we get to There Is a Happy Land. It's a song about the separation between the mentality of children and adults, how they are almost two separate races of people. And he definitely carries these themes on throughout his career. One of my favorite songs on this album is We Are Hungry Men. It's very comedic and definitely more in line with what you would expect from Bowie. It's about, well, a fascists dealing with overpopulation, as you would any silly little pop song. The next song is When I Live My Dream, which is filled with fantasy imagery, and it's got a very gentle and nice sound, but it ends up being kind of forgettable. The worst song would be Join the Gang. It's noisy and messy and full of really grating sound effects. I think there's even like a fart noise in there at one point. Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking with this. And then we have Please Mr. Gravedigger. It's full of these gross, wet, marshy noises as he digs graves and sings to himself. It's the accompaniment of nothing except for sound effects. It's a dark mood piece with wonderful lyrics. It's absolutely the most standout track from the album. And now we're on to the Deram Anthology. My thoughts on this are sort of a continuation of the self-titled album, except I think that if he put these songs together with some of the better tracks from that album, that he may have had more success. I mean, the worst song of his career is also on this, so The Laughing Gnome. I'm just going to read to you what it says on Genius. The mythological spirits of the subterranean underworld held great symbolism for psychiatrist Carl Jung, embodying the fertile juices of the unconsciousness with their capacity for wisdom. And he cautioned against dismissing them lightly. It is significant in this context that across the years, Bowie creatively manifested his own subterranean creatures of the underworld, hanging out with your dwarf men on the mysterious Beulah Brothers, gnomes and dwarves on the free association lyrics of Little Wonder. Instinctually theatrical, Bowie's expression of subliminal energies was not bounded by the intellectual self-constraint of Young, and his earliest creative work reveals a foreboding aspect around the unbounded unconscious, ironically illustrated in his own Kabiri-esque encounter from the underworld in 1967's whimsical Laughing Gnome. Followed home by a gnome, the narrator feeds and sends him off, only for him to weirdly reappear later with a doppelganger. Co-opting these twins' fertile creativity for financial gain, the young protagonist seems oblivious to the potentially subversive energies of unrestrained unconscious invasion and his ability to sanely coexist with these uninvited entities, now infesting his chimney stack, a now blocked interior vent, who taunt him. About their slippery, ungraspable nature, Young was not so naive. When one analyzes the psychology of neurosis, one discovers a content of the unconscious that does not behave as other contents do, coming or going at our command, but obeys its own laws. In other words, it is independent, or as we say, autonomous. It behaves exactly like a goblin that is eluding our grasp. I don't know if he sounded like that at all. Probably not. That's a lot of words to describe this terrible, awful, trash novelty song. The Laughing Gnome is a song about a man who's followed home by a gnome. They multiply, terrible puns are made, annoying sped up voices are used, and it's trash. The next two songs are Let Me Sleep Beside You and In the Heat of the Morning, both very romantic and seductive songs with great guitar lines. I really like the lyrics on both of these, and these are the first songs of his career that really start to sound like Bowie. Like, these deserve to be recognized as part of his catalog. You know, unlike The Laughing Gnome. Now, one more thing before we go. Bowie tried his hand at acting for the first time during this period. He starred in a short film called The Image. The story concerns a painter, played by Michael Byrne, who you probably know as Vogel from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, whose painting, played by David Bowie, comes to life and tries to kill him. The short film is 14 minutes long, features no dialogue, and is entirely held up by its stark black and white imagery its percussion score, which if you're a fan of the score from Birdman, you'll probably like this one too. It has a very nice, grim atmosphere that's claustrophobic and tense the whole way through. Michael Byrne doesn't really get a whole lot to work with here. He's mostly just playing off the emotion of fear. David Bowie's performance, meanwhile, is very stoic and he's sort of a blank slate. It works for what the film is going for, but it doesn't really give Bowie a whole lot to shine with. Michael Armstrong's direction for this film is very experimental for the time. His other contributions to cinema are The Forgotten, The Haunted House of Horror, the cult exploitation film Mark of the Devil, and most notably writing credits on the canon horror films House of Long Shadows and Life Force. So that's it for the beginning of Bowie's career. Next time we'll see Bowie's career begin proper with Space Oddity.